The sun beat down relentlessly, and the street buzzed with life, yet Darasimi stood with a heavy heart. She offered her oranges to anyone who passed, but the crowd hurried on, avoiding her stall. Her feet ached from hours of standing, and her spirit was just as tired. The noise of the city, the shouts of the traders, and the clattering of the buses did nothing to lift her mood. It was the same every day, the struggle to make enough money to survive. No one wants to buy today, how will I feed my brother? She whispered to herself, feeling the weight of her situation. Then, amidst the usual chaos, a sleek black car pulled up beside her stall. A well-dressed man stepped out, his expensive suit and polished shoes standing in stark contrast to the dirt and dust of the street. He moved confidently, but as he reached for his wallet, his body suddenly shook. His hand clutched his chest, and before anyone could react, he collapsed to the ground. The people around Darasimi barely noticed. Some whispered in confusion, others simply stared. "What's happening to him?" someone asked in a hushed tone. Their eyes lingered on his expensive watch and shiny shoes, but no one stepped forward to help. The man's condition didn't matter to them as much as his belongings did. The crowd surged forward, not to help, but to take advantage. Thieves quickly reached for his wallet, phone, and watch, leaving the man lying on the ground, helpless. They yanked his possessions from his body as though it was their right, ignoring the fact that he was still alive, breathing weakly. "Grab his stuff. Quick," one of them shouted, urging the others on. With quick hands, they emptied his pockets, their greed outweighing any shred of humanity. Darasimi watched in shock, her heart sinking. The man was alone, abandoned in his time of need. The sting of injustice burned inside her. How could the crowd just stand there, taking what wasn't theirs, leaving a man to die in the street? She clenched her fists, trying to understand. Is this really how we treat people? Is it because he has money? She muttered, her voice heavy with disbelief. The decision hit her like a lightning strike. Darasimi couldn't just stand there and watch. She couldn't turn away, not when someone needed help. Without another thought, she dropped her tray of oranges and rushed to the man. Her feet barely touched the ground as she reached his side. The crowd didn't seem to notice or care, but Darasimi's focus was clear. She had to help him. "I won't leave him here to die. Someone has to care," she shouted, as she knelt beside him, her determination stronger than the fear bubbling inside her. But as she leaned over the man, begging for assistance, she was met with nothing but cold indifference. People walked past, eyes fixed ahead, as if they couldn't see the man lying helpless on the ground. A few stopped to stare but offered nothing. "Why are you even bothering? He's just another rich man," one passerby sneered, turning away. Darasimi's heart tightened, but she refused to let their cruelty stop her. With every ounce of strength, she tried to lift the man. His body was limp, too heavy for her alone. Her small frame trembled under the effort, but Darasimi's resolve only grew stronger. She couldn't leave him. She wouldn't. "Please, help me," she cried out, her voice cracking with desperation. But no one answered. As time dragged on, Darasimi's frustration reached its peak. Sweat dripped down her forehead, and her body ached. The crowd continued on their way, indifferent to her cries, to the man's suffering. Doubts crept in, and for a moment, it felt like she was fighting a losing battle. But she couldn't stop. She couldn't let him die like this, abandoned in the middle of the street. "I can't do this alone. I have to try," she whispered to herself, gritting her teeth and mustering every last bit of strength. With the weight of the man in her arms, Darasimi took a deep breath and, heart pounding, made one last attempt. She pulled him across the street, ignoring the throbbing pain in her muscles. The crowd seemed to part before her, but no one stopped to help. The bustling street was a maze of obstacles, yet Darasimi kept pushing forward, focused on getting him to safety. "Come on, we can make it, just a little further," she urged herself, her determination unwavering, despite the chaos around her. Despite the people who walked by without a care, Darasimi refused to give up. The man in her arms was now her responsibility. She couldn't turn back, not when there was still a chance to save him. I won't leave him. Not like this. Not when I have the chance to help, she thought, her every step bringing her closer to a place of safety. With each stride, she felt a sense of purpose, knowing that her actions would define who she was from that moment forward. The day dragged on with the familiar weight of disappointment. Darasimi stood by the side of the road, offering her oranges to anyone who passed by. The heat was unrelenting, and the noise of the busy street made it feel as if the world was spinning faster than she could keep up. Her feet ached from standing all day, and her shoulders sagged with the exhaustion of having no customers. She had no one to help her, no family to turn to, and all she had left was the hope that she could sell enough to feed herself and her younger brother. Why is today so quiet? How will we survive if I can't even sell a few oranges? She muttered to herself, feeling the weight of her struggle pressing down on her. As she stood there, the world around her continued on without pause. People hurried past, their lives moving forward while hers seemed stuck. But then, a sleek black car pulled up in front of her stall, disrupting the routine. A man dressed in a sharp suit stepped out, his polished shoes catching the sunlight. His presence was commanding, and his every movement radiated confidence. Darasimi couldn't help but notice the stark contrast between him and the chaos of the street. That man must be important. Why is he here? She whispered under her breath, watching him as he made his way toward the shop across the street. Just as she wondered what such a man could be doing in her neighborhood, the unexpected happened. The man, mid-step, faltered. His body swayed before he collapsed to the ground with a soft thud. The people around him froze for a moment, then quickly resumed their busy lives, ignoring the man lying on the ground. Darasimi's heart skipped a beat as she rushed to his side. What's happening to him? Someone help him, she cried out, but the voices around her remained uninterested, and no one moved to assist. Instead, the crowd shifted. Thieves saw an opportunity, and like vultures, they descended on the man's body. Hands grabbed for his wallet, his phone, and his watch. In the chaos, the man's possessions were stolen, his body left to rot on the ground. Quick, take everything. He's too rich to care, one thief shouted, and the others rushed to obey, grabbing whatever they could. Darasimi watched, her stomach turning. She could not believe what she was seeing. The man's suffering had become a spectacle for others to profit from. She felt a deep sense of injustice. How could this happen? How could they take advantage of him like this, with no care for his life? The man had collapsed, and yet, no one even looked at him as a person in need. They saw only his wealth. Is this how we treat each other now? She muttered under her breath, shaking her head in disbelief at the apathy around her, but there was no time to stand still. The injustice stung her deeply, and in that moment, she made a decision. She could not stand by and let this man die in the street, abandoned and robbed. She dropped her tray of oranges and rushed toward him, her determination clear. I won't leave you like this. Help will come if I can just get you to safety, she said as she knelt beside him, trying to lift him. The weight of his body was too much for her, but she refused to give up. Her muscles strained as she tried again, struggling to move him, but the man's limp body was too heavy for her to lift alone. Why is this so hard? Come on, just a little farther. I can do this, she said through clenched teeth, her exhaustion growing with every failed attempt. As she pulled and pushed with all her strength, a local vendor who sold fried yam nearby, noticed her struggle. I was hesitant, unsure about what was happening, but seeing Darasimi's desperation, she finally approached. I don't know, Darasimi. This man might be dangerous. Why help him? I asked, unsure of whether it was wise to get involved. But Darasimi's plea left her no choice. Please, he needs help, and I can't do this alone, Darasimi responded urgently. Reluctantly, I lent her hand. Together, they managed to drag the man to a nearby stall, laying him on a bench. Darasimi fanned his face with her scarf while I sprinkled some water on his forehead. Despite their efforts, the man remained unresponsive. His breathing was shallow, and Darasimi felt a growing sense of panic. We have to take him to a hospital. He won't survive like this, she said, her voice thick with frustration. As they tried to find any identification to help them figure out who the man was, Darasimi's fingers brushed against a small card in his pocket. She pulled it out and stared at the name on the card, Femi Johnson, one of the wealthiest men in the city. She recognized the name from billboards and news reports. The shock hit her like a wave. Femi Johnson? The billionaire? I can't believe it. How could he be here like this? Her hands trembled as she looked at the card, her mind racing with disbelief. I leaned over to see the card, her eyes widening in recognition. Her usual skepticism turned into genuine concern. This is serious. We have to get him help now. Do you know who this is? I exclaimed, now fully aware of the gravity of the situation. Darasimi nodded, still processing the shock of what she had just discovered. The man she had helped wasn't just anyone, he was one of the richest men in the city, someone she had only ever seen in the news. The moment had shifted. No longer was this just a random stranger. This was someone who could change her life, someone who had the power to help or ignore her. But in that moment, all Darasimi knew was that she had done what she thought was right. And now, she had to see it through. The weight of the unconscious man was nearly too much to bear. Darasimi and I strained under his limp body, struggling to lift him from the ground. The man's dead weight felt like it could crush them both, but Darasimi's determination burned hot. Come on, Ai. We can't stop now. He's counting on us. Darasimi urged, her voice full of desperation. Every muscle in her body screamed in protest, but she didn't stop. She refused to leave him there. The crowded streets around them continued to swirl, indifferent to the struggle taking place just a few steps away. People walked past without a glance, their eyes fixed on the road ahead, unaware or uncaring of the two women trying to save a life. Darasimi's frustration mounted. Where is everyone? Why is nobody stopping to help? She muttered, her voice tight with frustration. The world around her seemed blind, as if no one noticed the suffering happening right before their eyes. Ai hesitated, her face drawn with uncertainty. She had seen so much in her years, and the idea of helping someone so wealthy, someone so far removed from their world, was unsettling. I don't know, Darasimi, this could be trouble. Are you sure about this? Ai asked, looking at the man with suspicion, unsure if they should be involved in such a situation. Darasimi's eyes locked onto her with a fierce resolve. Please, he needs help, and I can't do this alone, she said, her voice unwavering. The weight of the man felt unbearable now. Darasimi's muscles were burning, and the sweat trickling down her face made her heart race with the pressure. She had no phone to call for help, no money to pay for a ride, and no real plan. She could only rely on her will to act. As Ai paused, Darasimi's heart pounded in her chest. What am I going to do? I can't just leave him here. There must be something I can do, she whispered, her voice trembling with helplessness. As she searched through the man's pockets, her fingers brushed against a card. She pulled it out with shaky hands and stared at it in shock. The name on the card sent a wave of disbelief through her. Wait. Femi Johnson? Is this really him? I saved a billionaire, she gasped, her eyes widening with recognition. She had seen his face in the papers, heard his name on the news. This was no ordinary man. This was someone with power, someone who could change everything. Ai peered over Darasimi's shoulder, her expression changing from suspicion to sheer shock. Her voice shook with awe as she saw the name on the card. This is serious, Darasimi. We're talking about someone with power, someone who could change our lives. But we can't just leave him like this. Ai's concern deepened, and a new respect for Darasimi's decision started to form in her heart. The weight of what they were dealing with settled between them, but the urgency of the situation drove them forward. Darasimi's thoughts turned quickly. The man needed to get to a hospital, and time was running out. We're taking him to his company. Someone there will know him and help us. We can't waste any more time, she said, her voice steady with newfound resolve. With AI reluctantly by her side, they started their journey to get him to safety, but first, they needed to find a way to get there. They waved down taxi after taxi, but no driver was willing to stop. The streets were congested, and drivers were hesitant, unwilling to risk their time or their money on someone else's problem. Darasimi's patience wore thin as they were ignored again and again. Please, we need to get him to his company. It's an emergency, she pleaded, her eyes desperate for someone to help them. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, one driver slowed down, but he wasn't eager to assist. It wasn't until he saw the unconscious billionaire in their care that his attitude changed. His eyes widened in recognition as he caught sight of the man's face. Wait a minute. That's Femi Johnson. I can't believe it. Get in, I'll take you there right now. The driver's tone shifted from hesitation to urgency, his earlier reluctance gone. The doors opened, and Darasimi and AI hurriedly placed the man into the back seat. The taxi roared to life and sped off, racing through the crowded streets. Darasimi and AI held their breaths, knowing that every second counted. They had no time to waste. We're almost there, just hold on. We can't let him die in our hands. Darasimi said, her voice tinged with urgency. The sound of tires screeching and the hurried pace of the car made everything feel as though it were happening too fast. The world outside blurred, but Darasimi's focus remained solely on the man they were trying to save. The taxi raced toward the destination. Darasimi's mind raced with fear and uncertainty. Would they make it in time? Would Femi survive? I can't believe this is happening. I just helped save a billionaire's life. What if I made the wrong choice? Darasimi thought, torn between hope and fear. But there was no turning back now. They had come this far, and the end of the road was in sight. Darasimi and AI worked in unison, straining under the weight of the unconscious man between them. Each step felt heavier than the last as they struggled to drag him closer to the company's entrance. Every muscle in their bodies screamed for relief, but Darasimi refused to stop. Come on, AI. We can't stop now. He's counting on us. She urged, pulling with all her might, determined to save the life that hung in the balance. The company's building loomed ahead, grand and imposing, but all Darasimi could focus on was the man they carried. Her mind raced, hope and fear fighting for dominance. She feared they might be too late, but she pushed the thought away. They had made it this far. They had to make it count. We're here. Come on, please don't die on us now. Darasimi whispered under her breath, willing him to hold on just a little longer. As they reached the elevator, Femi's fingers twitched. His eyelids fluttered, a small movement that filled Darasimi's heart with cautious relief. She held her breath, waiting for more. The man stirred, his body showing signs of life, but his condition remained fragile. He's waking up. But will he be all right? Darasimi whispered, her voice shaking as she exchanged a glance with AI. Relief and worry mingled in her chest. She couldn't let him slip away now. The elevator doors opened, and the air in the room seemed to grow thicker. It was as though the world was holding its breath along with Darasimi. Femi lay on the stretcher, looking so small, so vulnerable. He was a man of wealth and power, and now, he was just a person in need. The moment stretched on before the door to the room opened, and a man walked in. He looked sharply at the scene before him, his gaze fixed on Darasimi. Who are you, and why did you help him when no one else did? The words were a challenge. Heavy with suspicion. Darasimi stood tall, feeling the weight of his eyes. She felt the need to explain, to defend her actions. I couldn't leave him there like that. I know he's rich, but he was just another person in need. No one else cared, so I had to, Darasimi said, her voice steady with raw emotion. She had no regrets, but the man's questions made her wonder if anyone would ever understand her choice. She had done what she believed was right, and that was enough. The man stood silent for a moment, processing her words. His expression softened, his suspicion replaced with something else. You didn't do this for anything in return?" he asked, his voice now gentler. A spark of respect flickered in his eyes, before the conversation could go further. Femi's voice cut through the tension. "Darasimi, come. I need to speak with you." The command was calm but firm, a man used to giving orders. Darasimi's heart skipped. She had saved his life, but what would come next? She hesitated, then walked toward him, feeling the weight of the moment on her shoulders. Femi's office was unlike anything Darasimi had ever seen. He sat at his desk, looking up at her with a gaze that mixed gratitude and authority. "You saved my life today. I owe you more than just gratitude," he said, his words heavy with meaning. For a moment, Darasimi couldn't speak. She had never imagined hearing such words, let alone from someone like him. She had simply done what she thought was right. Then Femi surprised her further. "You've shown great heart. I want to offer you something better than survival. I want you to work with me, to learn and grow," he said. His words were more than an offer, they were a chance for a new life, a life beyond anything she had ever dreamed. Darasimi stood frozen. The weight of his offer pressed down on her. "But why me? Why would someone like you help someone like me?" she asked, her voice trembling with disbelief. She had never expected anything in return. She had acted from her heart, not for reward, and now she stood at the crossroads of a future she never thought possible. Femi's gaze held steady. "You're different. Most people would have taken advantage of me, but you didn't. That's why I want to give you a real chance. You deserve more than what life has given you," he said. His eyes locked onto hers, and in that moment, Darasimi felt the weight of his words. She was no longer just the woman who sold oranges on the street. She had made a choice, and that choice had brought her here. But was she ready for what Femi was offering her? It was more than just a job. It was an opportunity to leave everything behind and start anew. The idea of such a life was overwhelming. Darasimi's heart raced as she stood at the crossroads of her life. The world seemed to pause around her, waiting for her answer. She had lived a life of struggle, of surviving day to day, and now the chance for something more was within her grasp. But the fear of the unknown held her back. I don't know what to say. This is so much, so unexpected," she said, her voice full of uncertainty. She stood there, facing the decision that could change her life forever. Would she take the chance? Would she leave behind the life she knew for something new, something unknown? The question hung in the air, as heavy as the future that awaited her. Darasimi stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest as Femi's offer hung in the air. A life beyond anything she had ever imagined was now within reach. Education, a job, a place to stay, all the things she had struggled for, the things she had never dared to dream about. She felt overwhelmed, unsure how to even begin accepting such a change. "You've changed my life, Femi. But, am I really worthy of all this?" she whispered, still in disbelief, her mind racing. It seemed too much, too fast. How could someone like her deserve such a chance? Tun watched her closely, seeing the uncertainty in her eyes. He had been there from the beginning, watching Darasimi struggle, fight, and grow. Now, he saw the hesitation that threatened to hold her back. He stepped forward, his voice firm, his words meant to push her forward. "Don't doubt yourself. Femi sees something in you. You deserve this," he said. His voice was calm but powerful, the encouragement in his words cutting through the layers of doubt that clouded her mind, but Darasimi could not shake the thoughts that weighed heavily on her. She had struggled her whole life, fighting for each meal, each step forward. Could she truly become someone else, someone different than the woman who had sold oranges by the roadside? "I've been struggling my whole life. Can I really become someone else?" she wondered aloud, pacing with uncertainty. Her mind was filled with questions, each one harder to silence than the last. The shift into her new world was jarring. It was a life she had never known. The luxury, the polished offices, the people who spoke with ease about business and management, it was all so far removed from the life she had once known. The contrast was sharp. This is nothing like I've ever known. How do I even begin? Darasimi muttered to herself, holding business documents in her hands, feeling a disconnect between her past and the present, but she wasn't one to shy away from challenges. She dove into her education with a fierce determination. Every day was a learning experience, from the basic principles of business to the complicated decisions that shaped the companies she now worked for. She had never thought about things like strategies, profits, or corporate management before, but now they were her new reality. And despite feeling out of place, she knew that the only way forward was to keep going, to keep learning. You're a fast learner. Keep it up, Darasimi. You're already catching on, Femi's approval echoed in her mind, a small, encouraging voice in the midst of her growing uncertainty. As she continued to adapt, Darasimi struggled with the idea of her new identity. The woman she had been seemed so distant now. The vendor who once stood on the street, offering oranges to passers-by, felt like a different person. She had once been defined by survival, but now she was expected to thrive, to excel in a world that felt foreign. I'm not the same person anymore, but who am I now, she thought, the question lingering in her mind as she faced this new life. She wasn't sure if she would ever feel at home in this world. Femi's constant encouragement began to break down the walls of doubt she had built. You have what it takes. You're more than the woman who sold oranges. You can lead, he had told her. His words had sparked something deep inside her, and slowly, she began to believe in herself. She realized that her past didn't have to define her future. She wasn't just the girl who had struggled in the street, she was capable of achieving greatness. With each passing day, Darasimi took ownership of her new life. She embraced her responsibilities with a newfound sense of purpose. She was no longer just trying to survive, now she was determined to thrive. She became more confident in her role, stepping into leadership positions with grace and authority. I won't waste this chance. I will make it work, no matter what, she said, standing tall, ready to take on whatever came next. The transformation was complete. Darasimi, once defined by her struggle, had become a woman of power and purpose. She had learned to navigate the world of business, made decisions, and shaped her future. Her past, though never forgotten, no longer held her back. I've come a long way, and I'm just getting started, she said, a smile spreading across her face as she realized the true extent of her transformation. Darasimi stood quietly, her eyes gazing out over the world she now found herself in. The journey that had brought her here seemed almost impossible to believe. She had once been nothing more than a woman selling oranges on a dusty street, struggling just to survive. Now, she stood on the edge of a life she had never dreamed of. She reflected on the moment when everything had changed, when she had chosen to help a stranger, a man abandoned by everyone else. That one act of kindness had set everything in motion. I never thought just helping someone could lead to all this, she muttered, her voice low as she considered how far she had come. What started as a simple decision to do what was right had opened doors she had never imagined. As she stood there, it dawned on her just how powerful her act of kindness had been, not only for Femi but for herself as well. In a world that often seemed filled with people only looking out for themselves, she had broken that mold. Kindness can change lives. It changed mine, and it changed his, she said aloud, a new understanding settling in her heart. Her life had been shaped by that one act, and it was a reminder that even in the harshest of places, selflessness could create ripples of change that reached far beyond what anyone could see in the moment. Looking back on everything that had happened, Darasimi now saw herself in a new light. She was no longer just trying to scrape by, struggling to survive each day. She had a purpose now, something far beyond simply existing. She wasn't just a survivor anymore, she was someone who had the power to shape her own future. I'm not just trying to survive anymore. I'm here to thrive, to make something of myself, she reflected, a sense of pride rising in her chest. She had walked a difficult road, but it had led her to a place where she could finally see her potential. Her thoughts turned to the unexpected people who had entered her life, people she would never have imagined would play such significant roles in her transformation. Femi, a man who seemed so far above her, had seen something in her that no one else had. Tund, who had once seemed like just a figure of authority, had become her strongest support when she needed it the most. Even AI, a simple vendor, had helped her when it mattered. Who would have thought that a man like Femi would see something in me? Or that Tund would encourage me when I felt lost, she marveled, reflecting on how those who seemed least likely to make a difference had turned out to be the ones who had changed her life. The twists her life had taken were beyond anything she could have imagined. In those quiet moments, Darasimi realized that the greatest power lay in selflessness. She had given without expecting anything in return, and in doing so, she had received far more than she could have hoped for. What had started as a simple act of compassion had opened the door to a world of possibilities. I gave him my help. And in return, I received a whole new life. Who knew that helping could bring so much? She smiled, the weight of her realization settling in. It wasn't just about the material things or the opportunities, it was about the transformation that came from giving without expecting anything back. That, she understood now, was the true power. Standing at the threshold of her new life, Darasimi knew one thing for certain: her life would never be the same again. The choices she had made, the risks she had taken, the kindness she had shown, those had all brought her here. The future was unknown, but she felt ready to face it. I don't know exactly what's ahead, but I know one thing: I'm ready for it. My life has changed forever, she said, standing tall. Whatever came next, she knew she was prepared. The past had shaped her, but it was her choices, her actions, and her heart that would shape the future. She was no longer just surviving, she was ready to thrive.